Welcome to the Zzeem webinar studio. For those of you who have a membership year that coincides with the calendar year, you're probably already working on your annual renewal campaign. And whether your membership expires at the same time for everyone, or it's on an anniversary basis, the same principles and process that we're going to be talking about today applies for both. We chose this topic because the member renewal campaign is one of the most important things that we do, and yet it's often one of the most overlooked. Often we put way more resources into attracting new members than we do in holding on to the ones that we have. I'm going to share with you some suggestions to elevate your member renewal game, to speed up your cash flow, and to use renewal as an upsell opportunity. For those of you who are regular attendees at our webinars, you know we host these webinars to give you timely, valuable information that you can take back to your association and use immediately. These webinars also give us an opportunity to help you see some of the work that we do, and when you're looking for help, we hope you'll think of us. So let's get started. Member renewal campaigns. Let's talk about first, why does retention matter? Well, first of all, if you don't have good member retention, sustainability is an issue for you. How long can the organization be sustained if you don't have a reasonable rate of member retention? It is also a response to the perception of your member value proposition. So if your retention rate is going down, that is perhaps not an early warning signal. It's a warning signal that perhaps your member value proposition isn't as strong as it could be, or isn't being communicated in a way that makes it resonate as well as it could. With good retention, retention is easier and faster than bringing new members into the fold. It's less resource intensive, and it's better overall for the organization to make sure that you've got a strong retention rate. It also is relevant to your critical mass, to your footprint, to your relevance in the marketplace. Obviously, with a larger membership, you are perceived to have more relevance. So retention matters for a whole bunch of reasons. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to start with your association management system, not because that is any part of Zzeem's business at all, and we don't make recommendations for association management systems, but it really is critical that you've got one that does what you need it to do. We're going to talk about building your campaign. We're going to be talking about concurrent messaging as well, too. This is the messaging that is going out on a regular basis as part of your regular membership activities, but happens to be concurrent with the member renewal campaign messaging that's going out at the same time. You are going to use both volunteers and staff for your renewal campaigns. You want to make sure that you're using them appropriately and effectively. You also need to make sure that you are demonstrating your member value proposition, both in your renewal campaign now and going forward in the future. Keep in mind that presupposes that you've got a rock solid member value proposition, that you've put the necessary effort into developing this, and you've got something that really resonates with your members and your prospective members. We're also going to be talking about live Q&A, so get your questions ready. So let's talk about your association management system first. I find that when you're trying to find the right association management system, it helps to start with the end. What are you going to be looking for from your association management system? Here are the things that we found are really valuable in an association management system. First of all, I like to be able to go in and see how long somebody has been a member, because that is really helpful in terms of calculating your metrics. You know, are you finding that you lose people, you know, after the first year to a greater extent than you lose them after the first 3 years? These things are important pieces of information, and also celebrating member highlights. If you've got their length and term of membership, it allows you to do that. You also want to be able to search by member on the services that that member has used. So when you go back into your AMS, you should be able to look up my name, for example, and say, oh, my goodness, Erin hasn't attended a single event or signed up for a single program in the last 12 months. Well, that tells you that potentially Erin is an at-risk member. You also want it to be able to tell you what the renewal amount is. So you want to be able to go to any member and see exactly what the renewal amount is for them. Sometimes it's not the same for everybody, and it's important to know which fee bucket each member falls into, because that might affect your messaging. Ideally, you also want an association management system that allows you to have an at-risk category. So when you have a conversation with somebody, you know, somebody phones up and they're really angry at something, or they're talking about something else and they're letting you know that they're seriously reconsidering whether they want to have their membership continue, you want to make sure there's a way of flagging that and running a report. You want to make sure that your association management system allows for multiple contacts and multiple contacts for different things. So for example, often you'll find that the decision maker will say, oh, we'll just put our accounts payable person as the major contact here. And now all of a sudden, all of your messaging is going into the accounting department. That's not really what you're looking for. You want to make sure that it goes to the accounting department when it's time to renew, but it's also going to the decision maker. The decision maker will ultimately decide whether the renewal happens or not. Your association management system should also allow you to run revenue by member type. If you've probably got at least two member types, one your core members and one your suppliers. Usually you've at least got those two. Sometimes there's other categories as well too. You want to be able to know where the majority of your revenue is coming from. And if it's coming, if it's 80% coming from supplier members, that's an area of vulnerability and something you need to be thinking about. You also want, and this is absolutely critical, you want your AMS to be able to do an auto send by date so that you can say on October 13th, I want this message to be going to these particular people. And when it comes to a renewal campaign, you want to make sure that your association management system will allow you to filter out the people that have already paid, because there is nothing more annoying than having already paid your member dues and continuing to get those messages about paying. This is something that is often very hard to do in an association management system. It is not something that every system has. So when you're trying to make a decision about which one to choose, look at that feature and find out whether it allows you to do that or not, because otherwise it's a really manual exercise and it's not something that you want to avoid, or people are going to get used to ignoring your renewal emails. Now, in addition to your AMS, you've got other tools that you need to be paying attention to. First of all, you want the payment process to be absolutely flawless. I should get an invoice in my inbox. I should click on a link, put in my credit card and be done, and it should be over. You don't want to take advantage of the fact that I'm ready to pay my membership now. I go in and I get interrupted, or we're still bottlenecked or not able to continue. Because it may not be that I'll get around to trying it again. I'll just be frustrated and I'll say, for Pete's sake, if you want my money, make it easy for me. Make sure that you're doing that. Also make sure that the tools you've got are adequate internally. You need to have adequate staffing. You need to have adequate volunteers. And these people need to have accountability for the renewal process and what exactly their role is in the renewal process. You're also going to need targets. In other words, what are your targets for your retention rate? And other categories that you're looking to track. And when are you going to be doing your reporting? Who's going to see the reports? And what are you going to do about the reports when you see them? This shouldn't be something that's left entirely up to the membership manager and they're the only one that knows what's going on. It really does take a village to do a really good job of a member renewal campaign. Now, when it comes to building your campaign, there are a number of pieces involved in putting your campaign together. And yes, it does take effort to put together. And once you put it together and you've got a really good campaign, you still want to be tweaking it on an ongoing basis. So every year there is new work to be done. Keep in mind that you want to be spending and putting as much effort into your member recruitment campaign as you would put into your conference, into a major advocacy campaign. Member recruitment and member retention are equally important. And as I said earlier, member retention arguably even more so. So if you would put a certain amount of resources into a member recruitment campaign, into a major advocacy campaign, into a conference, you want to be putting the same amount of effort into your member retention campaign. Now, what's involved in building your campaign? Well, we talked about the tools. You are also going to need all of these things. You're going to need retention targets. What are we trying to get at here? We're trying to get at 90% retention rate, 98% retention rate. What are we looking for here? You'll need timing for each stage of your campaign. So when does the next stage start? And you want specific dates and times for that. You're going to need a renewal pitch. Why should I renew my membership? The collateral needs to be set up well in advance. You don't want to be winging this as the dates come along. It needs to be all ready and ready to go. And you probably will want different collateral for different member types. Make sure that you have assigned specific accountability to staff members and to volunteers, and not just accountability, but accountability by when. we need this done by this specific date. And this has to go like clockwork. You don't want a situation where somebody receives a message and then it takes a long time for the follow-up to actually happen. You're going to need to know what incentives you're going to offer. Are you going to offer incentives for paying before the expiry date? Are you going to offer bundles that include discounts? Think about what the incentives are that you're going to offer and make sure that you are doing tracking on your metrics at every stage of your renewal campaign. So let's start with your retention targets. Obviously, you want your retention targets to be higher than they were last year. And you may be in a plateau range where you are really at the highest you probably can be for retention, and it's probably not going to get any higher because that's just the way it is. Generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, in my experience, if you are below 90%, you potentially have an at-risk situation going on there. If you're above 90%, there might be an opportunity to get stronger, to get higher. Keep in mind that the smaller the number of members you have, the more the greater percentage each member has for your ultimate retention rate. So you want to make sure that your goals are sufficiently high and you're really trying to hit 100% as close as you possibly can. Now, in terms of timing, you want to decide, okay, how many communications are going to be going out for this particular renewal campaign? This number of email messages are going to go out. This number of voicemail messages are going to be left, and you want a date to happen for each one. Remember, this has to be part of a process. It's not something that your volunteer or particularly your staff member are just going to do when they get a chance to do it. They've got to be doing this at specific times so that a sequence of events and a process is actually being followed. Also make sure that any timing for your renewal campaign is being coordinated with other messaging. If you are going to be sending out a renewal email at the same time you're sending out a message about the event, make sure that the event includes something about renewals. Make sure that the messaging is coordinated. Now, in terms of the timing, you want to make sure that you've started your process. In other words, getting a renewal campaign going a good 4 months in advance. So that means that you want to make sure you're not leaving it to the last minute, that you've got a couple of months to make any tweaks that you needed to make from last year. And if you don't have a formal process for your renewal campaign, then you want to start even earlier. Start now. Even if you just finished your renewal campaign, all the better. You've got some thoughts in your mind. You're remembering how it went. Start your renewal campaign as early as you need to, but at least 4 months ahead of expiry. Now, I recommend a 90-day cycle, and by that I mean a 90-day cycle where your actual renewal outreach is going to start 60 days in advance of expiry, and it's going to continue 30 days past the expiry date. Now, I do need to mention this because it often comes up in conversation. Do not be afraid to cut your members off. Keep in mind, I know in some bylaws, it actually doesn't allow you to cut them off until 90 days have expired. I certainly recommend having another look at your bylaws if that's the case, because the longer you let people stick around without being members and continue to get membership privileges, the more that habit gets entrenched. Oh, I don't need to do this now. I can delay this because I know they're going to keep me around for another 90 days. The problem is then next year's expiry date comes 9 months later instead of 12 months later. And before you know it, you've got an ongoing cycle. And this is just human behavior. You've got an ongoing cycle of people paying months and months late over and over and over again. You'd be surprised how effective it is if you really do cut members off once they've expired. So during that 90-day cycle, you're probably going to want 6 to 9 emails. You need enough, but not too many that they feel like they're being bombarded. And each of those emails is going to be different. You don't want to be sending exactly the same language to each person. And for some people, it's only going to take the first message. And the first message just needs to be straight to the point. Expiry date is coming up. Here's the incentive for early renewal. Here's the link to click. Do it now. For some people, that's all that they need. The next message is going to be different. And by the time you get to the point where they've actually expired, that messaging and the messaging for 30 days after expiry is going to be completely different. Make sure that you are noting on your social platforms that renewal season is around. Sometimes people don't pay as much attention as we would like to their emails. They might be paying more attention to your social platform. So make sure it's there too. Keep in mind, you're going to want to use phone calls. You don't need to phone every single member because there's a lot of members that are just going to renew without any further contact. But you are going to need to phone the people that are running late, are at risk, any of those things. And phone calls are going to be coming from the staff, and phone calls are going to be coming from the volunteers. So that's part of what you're going to need to do. Make sure, as I said earlier, that all of your collateral is prepared in advance, so that while you're in the middle of the renewal campaign, you're not writing collateral, you're focused on running the process and making it work. You also want to make sure that part of your cycle includes the post-expiry cycle. So what is the messaging that you're sending people after the expiry date has actually happened? My recommendation is that the day after expiry, everybody who is not paid gets a message saying, I'm sorry, your membership has expired and your membership privileges are in the process of being revoked, something along those lines. Be nice, but be firm. Make sure people understand this is the way it works and you have expired and you're very shortly going to get cut off of your privileges. We hope this is a mistake. We really want to have you back, but these are the facts. Now, in terms of your renewal pitch, remember, this is a marketing and sales undertaking. Whether it's a brand new member or a renewing member, you're still asking them for money in return for services. So make sure that you treat this as a marketing and a sales event. You need to be convincing me that it's a good idea for me to fork out either my money or my employer's money to have membership in this organization. And part of that isn't just money, but it's convincing me that I should be using my personal resources to engage with the organization, to show up at the events. It's going to be worth my while. It's not just the money, it's the time it takes to engage. Now, keep in mind that with your renewal pitch, your member segments may require different collateral and a different pitch for each one. For your suppliers, they just want to be where your core members are. So really for your suppliers, it's here's your opportunity to get in touch with your core members all in one place, all at once. For your core members, it's probably a different pitch. They are going to be more interested in the member services, what they're actually going to learn, what are the benefits that they're going to get from your government relations or other kinds of member programs. And if you've got other categories of members, you may need different collateral for them as well too. Keep in mind, this is again one of the reasons why it's really helpful to have a good association management system that works for you. Now, in terms of the pitch itself, and assume right now we're talking about email blasts, get to the point really quickly. Like I said earlier, your very first email that's going out about renewal, keep it super simple. Did you know you're about to expire in 60 days? Here's how you renew. If there's any incentives, here's the incentive. Click here, give us your credit card, and you're done. Get straight to the point. And that first 1 or 2 emails should really focus primarily on how you can get your message across and get renewed as quickly and simply as possible. You want to make sure that you've articulated something of the member value proposition in there. You've talked about what they're going to be missing out if they miss out on the year ahead. The year ahead is really important. You do want to have some highlights from the previous year, but what the decision they're making right now is, I've already had those benefits for last year. Now, is something going to be coming up this year that I want to make sure that I don't miss? Make sure that they know what they're going to be missing if they don't renew. Now, in terms of the collateral itself, you need email content for each communication, of course. You want to have an event calendar. Now, I can tell you, I often get concern from associations. They'll say, well, I don't know what my event calendar is going to be like for 12 months in advance. Like maybe I know when my conference is, but everything else, we kind of work it as it comes along. Don't worry about it. If you don't have exact dates for your event calendar, then make inexact dates. The fall of next year is when we're going to do this particular regional event. The spring of next year is when we're going to have our awards event. Put them into blocks so people have a rough idea when they're going to be happening. And you don't have to narrow it down to an exact date, but let me know what it is and roughly when it's going to happen. That much you can easily put together 12 months in advance. Make sure that you've got speaking points for your voicemail and your phone contact as well too. So it's not just the emails that you're going to be sending out, but at some point, if people haven't renewed by the time we're getting very close to the expiry date, you're going to want to launch your phone campaign. So make sure you've got your speaking points, not just for if you actually reach somebody, but when you most likely will be getting voicemail, you'll be needing speaking notes for that. Your collateral includes invoices. Anybody who is paying from a corporate perspective is almost certainly going to need an invoice. Maybe individuals don't need them as much as corporations do, but if you have a corporate situation, you don't want to have them ask you for an invoice. You want it included right away to make it super simple for them to renew. Now, keep in mind that you want to have speaking notes related to your renewal at events that are occurring around the time of your member renewal campaign. So let's say that your member renewal campaign starts 2 months before expiry. It ends 30 days after expiry. Any events, whether they're in person or they are virtual events, make sure that there's something in there about the renewal campaign. So, by the way, we're in the middle of our renewal campaign. We hope you've renewed. By the way, here's some exciting things that are coming up this year. Don't miss out on these events. So make sure that everything that you're doing in terms of delivering member services and member activities, that you are linking back to the member renewal campaign as well. In terms of your website, make sure that you've got that renewal call to action in several places. Make sure that you've got it right on the homepage. Now, not throughout the year, but for 90 days, make sure that your campaign starts with it on the homepage and it stays there until the renewal campaign is over. Any event pages, new events, make sure that you're calling attention to renewals. On the membership page, make sure you're calling attention to renewals. So make sure that you've got renewal information on multiple pages on your website, and be prompt about getting it up there and about pulling it down again. Also consider the opportunity to upsell. Now, consider bundling your event with a membership renewal. And by that, I mean any event or a signature event with your membership renewal. Keep in mind, it's a good way of getting people to sign up for events at the same time they're signing up for a renewal of their membership. And they're going to need some kind of an incentive, whatever that incentive means. Maybe, bring another of your colleagues for 50% off, or get a discount on the event, right away. Give them an opportunity to buy a bundle and get better value by renewing at that moment in time. Also consider, there's a lot of people who actually do want volunteer opportunities, and they are looking to you as their association to give them those leadership opportunities that they might be not getting on a day-to-day with their day-to-day job. So pitch any volunteer opportunities. If you've got a big campaign coming up that's part of this year's activity, say we really need a committee in order to manage this. We would love to have you on the committee. By the way, send us a message if you're interested in volunteering. If I've just volunteered to help out for next year, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to renew my membership. So anything that you can do to incentivize is really helpful. Keep in mind with your at-risk members, once you've identified a member as an at-risk member, you don't want to wait until the renewal campaign to reach out to them. You want to make sure you've reached out to them as soon as you've identified that they're at risk. Ask for a call or a meeting with them so that you can understand, what might be causing their distress, what is causing them to feel unhappy with their membership. You need to have a one-on-one conversation about this. This is not something that you can easily sort out with email. Make sure that it's not just staff involved. Try to find another member who has a relationship with your at-risk member. If you can't find somebody who's got a relationship with them, focus on somebody from your board of directors. So somebody with influence, somebody who's got a circle of influence. Don't just try to do it on your own. Bring in the big guns when you've got an at-risk member. And make sure that you're doing a lot of listening. You're not there to talk them into something that they're not sure they want to do. That isn't going to work. Nobody is that good a salesman. Make sure you're there to listen, not to sell. And the more you listen, the more you may find a way to make them happy about continuing as a member. Make sure that you've documented your renewal process. What's being done, by whom, when is it being done? Look at the collateral you used last year and make sure that you've tweaked it for this year. Make sure you make notes this year for next year. What worked? What worked particularly well? What did you do where you actually saw a bump in renewals? What are the metrics that you want to add for next year? What are the tweaks? What are the little things or the big things that you want to do differently next year than you did this year? In terms of accountability, you need to have a leader who is in charge of the renewal campaign, but keep in mind, this is not one person's job. You want people working throughout the year in order to make sure that everybody is going to want to renew. So that's part of it, delivering great service throughout the year. So when it comes time to renew, people genuinely want to, and that takes everybody. It takes everybody on the entire team to do that. But you want to make sure you've got a leader, and that leader is responsible for knowing what the targets are and making sure everybody is informed where we are performing against targets, and looking to other people to get input and feedback on what, if anything, should we be tweaking as we work through this campaign. Now, keep in mind, let's talk about compensation. I've often seen situations where we're putting a lot of resources into new member attraction campaign, and sometimes we will link staff compensation to the number of new members we bring in the door. I feel if you're going to be bonusing people, you should be bonusing them for retention rather than new member attraction. The problem with bonusing people for new member attraction, but not for retention, it leads to short-term thinking, and that can lead to bad practices. And it can actually mean ignoring current members in return for going after new members. If you are incentivizing your staff for strong retention, that's good for the organization, and it's good for the long-term sustainability of the organization. Now, let's go back and talk a little bit about incentives. First of all, you have to keep in mind who is paying for this. Is the employer paying for the membership? Is the employer paying for attendance at your signature event? Or is it the individual? If the individual is paying for both, then cash incentives will help because it's literally coming right out of my pocket or going into my pocket. But keep in mind, if the company is paying, but I'm the one as a member that's making the decision about when that's going to happen, or when I'm going to inform them, when I'm going to get the check to the organization, I may not care so much about a cash discount because it's not going into my pocket. It's going into my employer's pocket. So keep in mind, think about who's actually benefiting from this. If it's going to be me, the individual, then give me some incentives for renewing early. And we're going to talk about member fee increases as well. But one of the ways of handling member fee increases is to say, you know what, if you renew before expiry, the new member fee kicks in next calendar year or next fiscal year, but you can have it at the last year's rate. You will get your membership at last year's rate, not at the new current rate. So think of ways that you can incentivize people. I do encourage you to consider having your membership fees increase regularly at the cost of inflation every single year. And that way, if people get used to it, they will know they've got an ongoing advantage every year to investing in their renewal before the actual expiry date. In terms of your performance tracking, make sure that you have running 3-year metrics at all times. So anytime you're looking at the report, you can see here's where we were at this time last year. Here's where we are right now. Here's where we were 2 years ago and 3 years ago. At a minimum, you want to be tracking your retention rate for a renewal campaign. What is the retention rate that you had last year? What are you at so far this year, and at what time? Keep in mind, you want to know whether you're ahead or behind where you were last year at this time. If last year at this time, 85% of your members had already renewed, and right now you're only at 70%, there could be something that you really need to look into here. So you not only want to be looking at where your retention rate is at this moment, but where it was last year at this time. Think about making notes each year so you know what you did at each point in time. If you put in an incentive that kicked in at a particular time, make sure you note that, because you want to see whether that actually caused an uptick in your renewal rate. If you try something else new this year, see if you actually get a pop in your renewal rate. If last year at this time you were at 85%, you try a new thing and it doesn't change at all, well, then probably that particular incentive needs something else to try for next year. Any world events or activities or sector events, make sure you make a note of them, because that can have an impact on your renewal rate. It could have a dampening effect on your renewal rate. It could have a spike effect on your renewal rate. Make sure that you know what your percentage is of at-risk members. That may be something that you want to track from a performance perspective. If you regularly have at-risk members, then see what you can do about getting the percentage of at-risk members down. And maybe that's something that you need to be focusing on throughout the year as well, too. Keep in mind, once a member becomes at risk, they require immediate attention. So in terms of the renewal process, we mentioned that you want to start preparing your renewal process at least 4 months in advance of expiry. And if you really don't have a good renewal process yet, then start it even earlier than that. Make sure that you've got all the tools you need, your collateral, your staff, your volunteers, your accountability, your process, your incentives. Follow the checklist. This is why you need to have it documented. If you don't have it documented, then you don't have a checklist to follow. And it's very hard to report on things when you don't know when they were supposed to happen or who was supposed to be doing it. Look at your results from last year and do any tweaks that you think might help. Make sure that you've got your metrics set for this year and you know what they were last year, and make sure you've got that accountability organized. Make sure that you've got your outreach dates formally sketched out. This is when these emails are going to go out. These are the concurrent messages that are going to be going around events and other member programs that are happening at this moment in time. Make sure your content is already drafted and ready to go. Make sure your member value proposition features prominently in that collateral. Make sure you've updated your website. Make sure you've decided on what incentives you're going to use this year, and make sure you've tracked your results. Now, when it comes to concurrent messaging, just keep in mind, timing can work brilliantly for you, or it can work badly against you. I mean, think about the situation where I wake up in the morning, I come into the office, I see there's a renewal email waiting for me. So I look at my renewal email, and then some other message comes across from my organization that makes me question whether I really want to renew my membership. We don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that all of the messaging that's going out at renewal time is positive, it's on point, it's emphasizing the member value proposition in a way that is valuable to the member. We're talking about member services. Here's a new event that's coming up. Here's something valuable that you can get from an existing member program. Make sure that in all of your concurrent messaging, you are communicating your priorities for the current and upcoming year. By the way, this is something we're going to be focusing on in Q1 of next year. Make sure people understand that things are going to continue after expiry and they want to be there. And make sure that there is internal accountability for your concurrent messaging. There should be some communications person on staff that knows exactly what's going to be going out and when for your renewal process and for everything else as well too, and making sure that everything, the timing and the messaging works well together. I want to talk again about your association management system for a couple of reasons. Staff time and error are an important consideration. And if you've got an association management system that just isn't giving you what you need, you are probably wasting staff time that could have been better spent on getting more people renewed, more members renewed now and more members renewed earlier. In terms of auto sending on campaign dates, especially when you've got members that are on an anniversary basis. So in other words, you've got members renewing at all times throughout the year. The ability to have that auto send, 2 months before that person expires, and then 1 month, and then 6 weeks, all these things make it a whole lot easier if you've got an association management system that allows you to do that. And I will remind you again, make sure you are able to filter out the people that have already paid. Even if you've got to do it manually, you've got to do it. Don't send 2, 3, 4 messages to me after I've already paid for my membership. It makes me feel like you're spamming me. It makes me feel like you don't really know what's going on. You don't have a good system. You don't have a good process, or you don't have good people. And you don't want to be having that message lingering around after I've just renewed for my next year. Think about how you're going to use your staff and how you're going to use your volunteers effectively. The staff are there to do all of the initial work and pretty much most of it until we get close to expiry. You want your staff to set up everything on your association management system. You want them to create the collateral, the templates, anything that's going out in your social platforms, and you want to make sure that they've created all the speaking points for the voicemails and the in-person phone communication that you're going to be having. Your staff should be doing all of the automated email blasts, and they should be doing round 1 of the phone calls. So whether you choose to make a phone call just before expiry or just after expiry, have the staff do it first, because sometimes it doesn't require a lot of discussion. Sometimes it's just people have forgotten. And usually a staff phone call with a voice message saying, hey, by the way, Joe, I don't know whether you realized it, but your membership just expired yesterday. I'm hoping that's an oversight, and I'm hoping that you'll sign up. Please give me a call. It's Emily here. I can take your credit card for you, or I will also resend you the email that gives you a link. Those first round phone calls should be done by staff, because you may not need moral suasion for a lot of people that have just, let it drift a little bit too long. Now, when it comes to volunteers, this is when you're going to be bringing out the heavy hitters. Either these are members that are just about to expire, they've already expired. These are the people that are going to be doing your round 2 phone calls. So remember, these people have had multiple emails, they've not renewed. They've had a phone call from a staff member, they've not renewed. Ideally, you want some member that actually knows them, so they can actually have a candid conversation with them. If you don't know a member that actually knows them and has some sway with them, keep in mind it's not somebody that just knows them, but somebody who has some influence. Make sure that you're using your directors, those people that are the most influential and are likely to have the most influence on those individuals. Make sure that you are vetting your volunteers ahead of time, by the way. Don't use people to do this volunteer task who feel uncomfortable picking up the phone to people. Often your suppliers are great for this task because they're often, sales and marketing people. They're more than happy to pick up the phone. That's part of their job. Use people who are going to get excited and interested to pick up the phone. Don't use people for whom it's going to be an agony because they're just going to delay it as long as they possibly can. Get people who actually want to do it. And make sure that they've got all the email templates to follow up. So if I'm a volunteer, I'm going to be looking for a phone number and the people that I need to call. Any basic information about that member, I need that information as well too. And I should also, assuming I'm going to get voicemail from them, because I probably will, give me an email template that I can use to follow up as a volunteer. Hi, Erin here. I hope you got my my voice message. I'm hoping you're going to rejoin us this year. By the way, I've just renewed, and here's one of the reasons why I'm really looking forward to what's happening this next year. Make sure you've got a template for your volunteers so they don't have to make this stuff up on their own. Keep in mind whether you've got everyone expiring all at once or you've got everyone on an anniversary basis. Really, if you've got everyone expiring on an anniversary basis, you've arguably got, 365 campaigns, but at a minimum, you've probably got at least 12. So make sure that whatever you're doing for your member renewal campaign, you're keeping in mind that you're not just doing it every once in a while for your anniversary people. Make sure that you got your anniversary people and your annual people well covered. Now, let's talk about your member value proposition. Your member value proposition answers the question, what's in it for me from the perspective of your member? And this bears repeating. Don't assume that because I've been a member for the last 5 years, that I still remember why I joined in the first place. Maybe I've been a member for the last 5 years only because I haven't gotten around to not renewing. You don't know necessarily why I'm still a member. And you want to make sure that you're telling me why I should continue to become a member. So this is not a list of the stuff that we do. This answers the question, why should I bother? So in other words, what pain are you going to help mitigate for me? What pain are you going to help take away? What desires that I really have and I need are you going to help me to fulfill? How are you going to do that? These are questions that you're looking to answer when you're stating the member value proposition. And you always want to be thinking about how can we as an organization increase our value? You want to be looking at your member value proposition on at least an annual basis and thinking about, is this still resonating with people? Does this still make sense to people? It's funny, when you think about the basic things like, what is our member value proposition? Does it resonate? Are we doing a good, effective job on our renewal campaign? These are motherhood questions, and many of us aren't asking those questions even once a year, and we really do need to do that. Rate increases, we are going to have to do rate increases on an ongoing basis. Our costs go up, and therefore our membership fees have to go up because what it's costing us to deliver the services is going up. And if we let a gap develop between what it's costing us and what we're receiving in member dues, we are going to end up with a situation where we've got to increase member fees by a large amount all at once. And that is something you want to avoid at all costs. I mentioned earlier, the easiest thing to do is just to implement a policy where every year your member dues go up by the cost of living, by the consumer price index. Now, this isn't something you just want to spring on people, just like any other rate increase. You want to make sure that they know well in advance. So regardless of whether you're heading to a CPI annual increase or you've got an increase coming up, give your members a full year to adjust to it. You don't want to tell people 2 months before expiry that, oh, by the way, member fees are going up by 20%. If it's going to be a large hike, you're going to have to make sure that you have a year to sell this to people so that it does not come as a surprise to them and they've got reason to believe it's worthwhile having that extra 20%. And by the way, saying that your costs have gone up 20% isn't really the most compelling value statement for your members. I mean, that's an obvious statement, but you want to make sure that whatever you are doing to market and sell that renewal and that increase is relevant in terms of the plans that you've actually got. So in terms of the summary, you're going to need a good association management system that gives you the stuff that you need relatively easily and doesn't involve a lot of, workarounds on the part of your staff, because you want your staff focused on the actual members and the renewal. Make sure that you've built your campaign and it's done well in advance and it's all ready to roll out right from the get-go. Don't be doing it as the campaign is developing. Make sure you're paying attention to your concurrent messaging. What other messages are going to be going out in the middle of your renewal campaign? Are you going to be advertising events? Make sure that you're tying that into your renewal campaign. By the way, this next event is going to be after the expiry date, so make sure you're renewed so you can take advantage of our next event in February. Make sure that you're using your staff and your volunteers effectively. Make sure that everything that you're doing in your renewal campaign is demonstrating your member value proposition. And remember, we talked about what a member value proposition is and how important it is to review it on at least an annual basis. And also make sure you're planning for your rate increases. You know when they're going to happen, and you're advising people at least a year in advance of what's going to be happening with a rate increase. All right. I'd like to hand it over to Kevin now. If we've got any questions, please share them.
Definitely, Erin. So first question is, our association faces issues with members paying by January 1st. What ways can we increase on-time payments?
Okay, let's talk about on time as opposed to January 1st. Getting people to pay on time is partly a question of reminding them in good time. People will usually not pay at the first time they get a message. So if you want them to pay on time, I definitely recommend that you start your renewal campaign at least 2 months before expiry date. That's going to give me as the member plenty of time to get around to doing it. A reasonable number of reminders. So starting early is important. I also encourage you to have incentives. So for example, if you have a situation where your fees go up automatically by the inflation level every year, then I encourage you to have an incentive that says, if you pay before the expiry date, you can get in at last year's rate. Yes, it's going to cost you a little bit, but it's going to increase your cash flow. It's going to increase your sustainability, and it's going to get people used to paying early. So that's something to think about, having incentives and starting early. In terms of January 1st as a date, because we've got that holiday in December, which tends to suck the life out of all the work that we're doing from the 15th of December onwards, you probably want to start earlier than 60 days before if January 1st is your expiry date, because you know people aren't going to be doing much in the latter part of December.
Thanks, Erin. Next question is, when the regulator increases their dues by almost our entire membership fee in 1 year, and ours is a voluntary membership.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That really sucks. When you're in a situation where your members are not only paying your voluntary membership, but they're also paying an involuntary membership to actually practice their profession, they are going to look at these as kind of two sides of the same coin. And when the fee that they absolutely have to pay goes up dramatically, that's going to make them question, paying the voluntary fee. It's just human nature, and there's not much you can do about that, because the regulator is probably not going to give you the heads up when they're about to increase their fee. However, if you have that kind of relationship with your regulator, it would be really nice to know that. I would consider doing a couple of things. First of all, if your membership year coincides with the regulator's membership year, see what you can do about changing that. Because if people are getting hit with 2 fees at more or less the same time, let alone right after the holiday season, you want to try to do something about that. So try to make sure that your membership fee is, is 6 months away from the regulator's membership fee, if that's an opportunity. Consider also offering a payment plan. If people are struggling and you can see this happening, you can reach out to them and say, look, I know that, you guys are getting hit with a big increase from the regulator. If you need a payment plan, please reach out to us. And if you need to pay quarterly this year, we're happy to offer that to you. So consider a payment plan, Kevin, if that's an option for you.
Okay, next question. Does the timing of our membership renewal affect our renewal rates? Currently, our organization's renewal period begins on January 1st, and our accountant doesn't allow prepayment. We often struggle to get members to renew at that time of year. Would there be a more optimal time of year for membership renewal?
Okay, well, let's deal first with January 1st, and then let's take a run at your accountant, because that I have never heard of that before. In terms of your January 1st date, because for many people there's a long holiday period in December. If January 1st is your renewal date, start earlier. Don't start necessarily at the beginning of November. Start sometime in October, so people have plenty of time to get it out of the way before they start winding down into holiday mode. A more optimal time for membership renewal. It's hard to know what's optimal. I mean, January tends to be a busy month for people. September tends to be a busy month for people. Summer seems to be a time when people aren't paying attention to a lot of things. So I don't know that there is an ideal time for membership renewal, but let's talk about your accountant. What do you mean your accountant doesn't allow prepayment? I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense. Keep in mind, from an accounting perspective, let's just say for purposes of argument that your membership year is January to December. You are going to hope that people are going to be paying before January 1st, that they're going to be paying ahead of time. And from an accounting perspective, obviously that's going to be deferred revenue. So that deferred revenue will show up on your balance sheet until such time as your membership starts, and then it'll move into income. So like I said, I don't know where that accountant thing is coming from, but remember, and I'm very fond of accountants and I think very highly of them, but your accountant should not be driving your membership bus. Find out more and talk to that accountant, find out what's going on.
So next question is, this participant just wanted to hear more about incentive bundles.
Sorry, say that again, Kevin?
So the exact question was, would love to hear more about incentive bundles. Maybe if the individual who asked this question had specific aspects of incentive bundles that they wanted to learn more about.
Well, certainly bundling membership renewal with the annual conference is a common one. And again, it comes down to a question of who's actually paying for the conference and who's actually paying for the member fees. Sometimes you have individuals paying for the member fees, but it's the employer paying for the conference. So if you have a bundle, the benefit is more distributed over the two entities. So keep in mind that for those people who are actually paying their own way, whether it's the conference or the membership fees, those incentives are more likely to have an impact, financial incentives. Now, there are other ways of having incentives. The incentive might be a gift card. So if you pay before the expiry date, we'll send you a gift card. And we'll let you in at last year's membership fee. So they can go to their employer and say, by the way, if you pay my fee early this year, there'll be a discount. It'll be, less money coming out of your budget. And by the way, I might be getting a gift card, or I'm going to be put in a draw for a gift card. So that's something to be thinking about in terms of your bundling your membership. You might also consider bundling it with a member program or a regional event. It doesn't have to be an annual conference. And one nice thing about bundling with something that's happening later in the year, it guarantees that you're actually going to get people out to that event because they've already prepaid for it.
Thanks, Erin. And the person who asked that question just followed up with saying, we are hesitant to bundle membership dues with event registration because of accounting.
Okay, another good reason to have a chat with your accountant. What you are going to need to do is to have the discount rate for your conference. Let's say you've bundled your conference with the membership. And the membership is $300 and the conference is $1,000. And you're going to get $100 off your conference. So the conference is actually going to be $900. The accounting department just needs to know that. So persons has paid their X number of dollars for their fees for the membership for next year. If it's ahead of the expiry date, then that goes into deferred revenue. And they've also paid $900 for the conference, which hasn't happened yet. So that's going to go into deferred revenue as well, too. Honestly, just sit down and have a chat with your accountant. This is not difficult stuff, and it should be very easy for your accountant to do. If your accountant's telling you it's not possible, you may have a bigger problem that you want to discuss.
Aaron, next question is, what is your best practice for selecting collateral material for each membership segment?
Well, first of all, get to the point quickly. If your explanation is going on too long, people are just not going to read it. So make sure that within the first 3 or 4 lines, you've got to the point, and that will make them decide whether they want to read more or not. But make sure that within a couple of sentences, I know exactly what you want from me, and I know what's in it for me. That can be awfully hard. I'll tell you, out of all the member renewal messages I've ever seen, I would say 98% of them are way too long and don't get to the point. Often it talks a lot about the association. Here's the wonderful things we've done for you. Here's why we're great. And that's not really what we're looking for. We're looking for something that grabs my attention. Why do I want to pay my fees? And why do I want to do it now instead of waiting for 3 months? So, think about what you want to have in the collateral and make sure it gets to the point really, really quickly. Honestly, obsessing over the words in this is worth your while. Because keep in mind, this is your retention rate. This is one of the most important elements of sustainability for your organization. You don't want to just dash something off. You want to put as much effort into this communications campaign as you would put into any other communications campaign. Make sure that you're spending a lot of time on this. And you've got people that are good at communications who are putting this stuff together. You certainly don't want your accountant deciding on what is going to go in your renewal campaign unless your accountant tends to be a communication professional.
Next question. What are the pros and cons of a single renewal date versus renewal at birth month, for example?
Yeah, great point. And I've certainly heard both sides of the equation on this. I mean, on the one hand, the advantage to having a single renewal date is you can coalesce your resources all around that one date. You're going to be on fire for 2 or 3 months, but everyone is going to the same, dancing to the same beat, to the same drum. Everybody's doing their bit to get those renewals moving. You're tracking your performance metrics all at the same time. That can be a really good way of mobilizing everyone at once. So the annual campaign can be very helpful. The challenge with the annual campaign is it tends to suck the life out of your staff all at the same time every year. So if you don't have temporary resources that you can bring in, it can be a tough time for staff. And it does mean it's very difficult to do anything else while you're in the middle of a member renewal campaign. So first of all, if you do have an annual member renewal campaign, make sure that you're not having your conference immediately before or after that. Make sure that you've got the resources to do what you need to do. So those are the pros and cons of annual. The advantage, of course, of having it on an anniversary basis, it's happening throughout the year and you don't suck the life out of all your staff because it's happening throughout the year. The problem with it happening throughout the year, sometimes you don't have staff sufficiently motivated and really focused on the member renewal campaign because heck, it's happening all the time. So if you can get your team sufficiently motivated around retention, and it is throughout the year, that can work really well. But also for a lot of people, having it work annually can be something that really galvanizes the whole team and works really well that way too.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Next question is, what type of cadence do you recommend contacting members?
I mentioned earlier that if you've got a 90-day campaign, and by that I mean starting 60 days before expiry and ending 30 days after expiry, I would recommend a minimum of 6 and probably no more than 9. If you have 9, that means you're sending them 3 a month, which is close enough to once a week. You probably don't want it any more frequent than that. And you do, remember, you want to make sure that in your cadence, it's not just how frequently are they happening, but each message needs to be a little different than the previous one. So you don't want people getting exactly the same message, 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 times before they actually renew. I'm suggesting, every week and a half to 2 weeks, something along those lines, and make sure that each message is different than the one before, that it's an escalating message.
Okay, so this next question is fairly similar to one you had answered earlier, Aaron. And basically it's, can you please share more about bundling? We are hesitant to bundle membership dues with event registration because of accounting.
Right. Yeah, I did tackle that one earlier. Really, you've got to talk to your accountant. This should not be the case. I've worked with many associations that do this. I have never seen it be a problem. I think you just need to sit down with your accountant or perhaps it's your bookkeeper and talk to them about how they're going to account for it. Basically, what you're doing here is you are prepaying for something. So it's going to end up in your balance sheet first before it actually ends up in your income statement. Do we have any other questions, Kevin?
Just one more. We are thinking of offering a discount to an existing member for a successful new member referral. Do you have any advice with this issue? For example, what would an appropriate level of discount be?
Right. Okay. Well, keep in mind, it's not going to be particularly valued to your member unless it goes into their own pocket. So if their company pays for the membership, you might want to consider getting them, a gift card or something along those lines rather than a membership discount. But offering a discount for bringing in a new member is a really good thing. One thing you might want to think about, if you've ever got, any of these campaigns going on where, if you're reaching out to members and saying, hey, if you bring in a member, we will give you a discount or we'll give you a gift card or whatever it is, or a chance to win. You want to make sure that the member they're bringing in is getting a similar deal, because it doesn't make me feel very good as a prospective new member if I know that Kevin is getting, Kevin's getting $100 in his pocket for bringing me in the door and I'm not getting anything. So think about making sure that if you've got a member, get a member campaign, that the prospective member is getting something as well too.
Thank you, Aaron. That was the final question.
Okay, wonderful. I don't know, those of you who are in the middle of your renewal process right now or thinking about it for the future, if there's something you would like in terms of a review of your renewal process with some suggestions for what you might do to tweak it, to make it stronger, to make it more powerful, just reach out to us. And if you are not certain about the relevance perhaps, or the strength of your member value proposition, talk to us. That's something that we can help you with. In terms of the next event, on November 12th, we've got Strategic Planning Masterclass coming up, and Kevin will be following up with you for your feedback about this event and upcoming events as well, too. I look forward to seeing you next month.